Paragraph. So this is the middle part of your essay, and this is where you then prove your thesis, right? So every body paragraph is going to start with what we call a topic sentence. And a topic sentence, so we've got a link here, we can click here, right? It's a sentence that states the main idea of the paragraph, and often but not always opens the main idea. So notice here it says you'll find it helpful to use topic sentences to keep your paragraphs focused. So yes, you have to use topic sentences. They must be the first sentence in your body paragraphs, right? So it's kind of like a thesis statement in that it controls the paragraph. What you say is your topic in your topic sentence must be the only thing that you talk about in your body paragraph, just as the thesis tells us what the essay is going to be about, and that's the only thing you can talk about in the essay. So from the essay come the topic sentences, right? And so again, your body paragraph is going to give us the support. So we can click that little link there. So anything that's underlined like that, it's going to give you a little pop-up to tell you what that means. So support can come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and some things will be suitable for some types of writing and some things won't. So again, you can look at the handout. The essay assignment will sometimes demand certain kinds of evidence. Like when we get to the last paper where you have to do research, you have to use research. You can't just use personal experience, right? But in this first essay, if it's a narrative, then you can use personal experience and you're not allowed to use research, right? So again, you have to look at the essay assignment to make sure you're using the right kinds of support, right? So again, facts, reasons, examples, statistics. Examples are always part of support for an essay though. Essays demand examples, right? So you can explain what something is, but then you've always got to give us an example of it. Examples make your explanation concrete, right? And so again, paragraphs should also be unified, coherent, and well developed, so we're going to see what those things mean, right? They also follow particular patterns of development, and they also support the thesis. So this is all that body paragraphs do. So what does it mean to be unified? Well, that just basically means that once you state what the idea of that paragraph is, that's the only thing that you can talk about in that paragraph. You can't go off topic. That's it, right? And again, if you don't maintain that unity, you have a problem. Paragraphs should be coherent. That means everything is connected. So this is where we use things like transitions and keywords to help our readers see the connections between all of the ideas, right? So again, keywords, pronouns, transitions are all ways that we create coherence, right? So that stuff isn't choppy. It's not like we're taking great leaps and we're like, well, how did I go from there to there? I might say things like on your essay, like, I don't see how these two ideas are connected. How do we go from this sentence to this sentence? You need a time lapse, right? Give me a transition, TRANS, right? Transition, right? So again, that provides coherence. So coherence basically means that it makes sense. Your reader's going to understand what you're talking about. And so here is a nice section about transitions, right? Paragraphs should be well developed, right? That just basically means that you've given us enough information to prove the point that you're trying to make, right? So I'll say you need more examples. I might even say that you've not developed the idea enough, right? If you haven't, then you can, like here we say here, you can go back and look at your brainstorming, or you might need to brainstorm some more. You might need to change your point. You might find out that's just not a good enough point. Maybe you need to substitute it for something else. So here are the kinds of things that you can use as support to help develop your topics, right? Examples, specific examples. So what is a specific example? Well, there are three kinds of examples. You've got specific, typical, and hypothetical, right? So for example, for example, right? So what is a typical example? A typical example is something like you say, it generally happens this way, right? So students come into my class and really do well in the first essay, right? That's a typical example. I'm saying what usually happens, right? A specific example will be saying, students come into my class and usually do well. For example, last semester, 5 students made 100s on their pre-writing right off the bat. Now that's specific. I have given you exactly what happened. I could even say a particular person, right? So that's the difference between specific and typical, right? Hypothetical example is something that has not actually happened. It might be that it hasn't happened, so I have to make a for instance, right? So I might say, in most college classes, students may come in and do this, right? So I'm hypothesizing about what might happen. So that happens a lot, like in science, or even like if someone is trying to predict what might happen or what has happened, we might use a hypothetical. For example, if I wanted to say, we must pass this law because if we don't, this is what might happen. I'm going to give maybe a hypothetical example, right? So we want specific examples, though, here. What I like to say, though, is the way we really develop a good paragraph is that we start with a typical and then we give a specific example after it, right? So we could say something like, it was really important for me to know what I wanted to do because I always found that having good organization made me much more on point. For example, right? So I could give a typical example, then I would follow it up with the specific. I think that's a really good way that academics like to develop their paragraphs, right? So reasons, these are underlying causes or explanations. So why did something happen, right? Again, facts, these are things that are verified or proved, right? Something that science has said this is true. Statistics, notice the things in green are important. These must be from reputable authorities or organizations. If you're going to bring in research, you got to make sure that you're using good sources, right? Details, parts or portions of a whole. So again, I'm looking at small things that give us that color that brings things to life, right? Expert opinions, so these would be recognized authorities in a particular field. So you need to make sure that when you're going to bring in somebody's information, do a little research to make sure, well, who is this person? Are they really someone that I should quote with authority, right? You can use personal experience. This might be a type of support that works. Depending on the kind of essay, it could be totally relevant. And then don't overlook the idea of using visuals like photographs, charts, and graphs, right? So effective support has to be relevant, right? It has to be related to your thesis. Just because you've cited something doesn't mean that you've checked off the box that you've done good support, right? It has to be specific, right? Not so vague that it doesn't really do anything for us. Like if someone says, I really learned a great lesson that day and it helped me a whole lot. Well, that's really vague. What did you learn? How did it help you? Give us an example, right? Your support should be adequate. That means that you've given us enough information that you've thoroughly proved it, right? Sometimes people will just give us a little bit, but that's not proven it beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? And so here again, how do you know how much support you need? Well, that really depends on the context of your essay. Who is your audience? What is your purpose? What is the scope of your thesis, right? So there's no one set answer to that. It really just all depends, right? It should be representative, right? So that means that when you give information, that should be what is typical of the situation and not atypical, right? So for example, if I want to try to say, oh, students are horrible, right? And I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. I went to the farmer's market and I got into a conversation with somebody and they were going off and on about something. And every example they gave was just so atypical of what was true about something. And I wasn't even going to I was just like, can I just get my tomatoes and leave? Because I just knew this person wasn't rational. But it was like, boy, this person was in la la land. Their examples of everything they were using to try to prove their weird conspiracy theory was just so atypical of what the normal experience was. I mean, and I know information about the situation they were talking about. I'm not necessarily an expert, but I am well informed. Their evidence was just crazy. It wasn't representative of what the facts were, right? Your support should be documented. That means that if you're bringing in research from somebody else, their ideas or their words, whether you're quoting it or summarizing it or paraphrasing it, if it's going in your paper, no matter how you're putting it in that paper, you got to give them credit, right? And we give them credit in two ways. We at the point that you're using the information in the actual paragraph itself, you have to give them credit, and then you got to put it on the works cited page, right? And we'll do a unit on that to know that. But again, you've got the information there that you can at least, or if you're using it and you're not sure how to do it, you ask me if we haven't done that in class already, right? Every body paragraph should follow a particular pattern of development. So again, we're doing a narrative as the first essay, we're doing exemplification, right? Whatever that pattern is, you can follow that. And that chapter will show you that pattern of development. I might give you a particular pattern if there are options. Sometimes you have different options that you can take in the chapters, and I might say I want you to use option A or B. So you need to make sure that you're paying attention to the essay assignment sheet if I've given you a specific choice that I want you to use. But again, you need to make a choice and stick to it and be consistent. Every body paragraph should clearly support the thesis statement. That's pretty obvious. And then this tells you again, well, what does that mean? So here is the thesis. Despite the emphasis by journalists on objective reporting, there are 3 reasons why television news is anything but objective. So by saying this, we're going to expect that every body paragraph is going to give us one reason why television news is not objective. So here's one. Television news is not objective because the people who gather the report are biased. So there's one objective. It's not objective because networks face pressure. So there's a second one. And it's not objective because networks focus on ratings. So there's each of these body paragraphs start with the reason why television news is not objective. And they're different reasons. And they're all about television news. So these all support the thesis. So this means that it is unified, right? Okay. So the conclusion. So this is our last paragraph. This is the last chance you get to convince your reader of whatever it is you want them to believe, right? It must be consistent with the rest of your essay. So again, tone and scope. It can't introduce new points that you've not already talked about. And again, you have to restate your essay's main idea, right? So now here are some strategies. So again, review your key points or restate your thesis. So you want to start your conclusion by paraphrasing your thesis. So that basically means you're going to take that thesis, but you're not going to just copy and paste it. You're going to rephrase it in some way. And we do that because your reader is in a different place than they were in the introduction. In the introduction, you were just getting them started. You hadn't argued your case yet. But now in the conclusion, they've read all of your body paragraphs. They've heard all of your arguments. So you need to rephrase your thesis to reflect their new knowledge about your thesis. So restate your remind them what the whole point is of the entire essay, right? And then you have some options. Sometimes you want to review your key points, but you don't want to just list the 3 topic sentences over again. What you want to do is you want to join them together in this big picture moment because you've not had them all 3 together. So you want to say, how do all of these 3 things work together to make this bigger point, right? So that's what it means by reviewing. You can and should do one of these 2 things, and you can do both of them together. And in fact, I think a really great conclusion does all of these things. It restates your thesis, it gives an overview of your main ideas, and then it recommends a course of action and predicts what will happen if people do or do not act, right? And then it can end with a quotation. The quotation is not necessary, but I think it can be nice, again, as long as it is relevant, right? So again, depending on the kind of essay, especially if you're writing an argumentative point, if you're making an argument, I think definitely recommending course of action and prediction is important. But I think that even if you're writing a personal essay or you're writing an informative essay, recommending a course of action and making some kind of prediction about what can happen if people take the information or make a change is still very powerful. Give people something to do. Encourage them to act. I think that is very powerful and ends the essay on a very energetic point as opposed to just the, huh, and so that's my point, right? No, give them something to do. So here's what not to do. Don't repeat your exact thesis at, point by point on your main point. That's boring. Don't end with an empty phrase. Don't use those cliches, right? Ugh, that's awful. Don't introduce new points or go off in new directions, right? Don't end with unnecessary and never. So remember, you're not ever supposed to say in this essay. Don't ever say that. Well, also don't say in conclusion. Please, please don't do that. Don't make me waste my ink by scratching it out. I hate that. It's one of my pet peeves. So don't say in conclusion. So that is the chapter on arrangement. So again, email me if you've got a question. I'll be more than happy to help you, answer those questions that you have about writing. Remember, it is just really a lot of trial and error. Just get your ideas down and start making them better, and then I'll look at them and I'll give you some tips about how to make it better. And that's the way we get to be better as writers. We just get in there and we just work, 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 and you will. I promise you get better if you just try. So bye bye. I hope you have a great day.